In July 2020, Taylor Swift basically threw her multi-million-dollar stadium pop checklist straight in the trash. When you read that release note for Folklore, the one where she explicitly states her summer plans fell apart, you aren't reading PR copy.
Well, I mean, that's highly debatable.
It's the manifesto of an artist who was forced into isolation and finally, genuinely surrendered to her art. For over a decade, her entire career was predicated on these hyper-calculated, mathematically precise pop cycles. Every era had a color palette, a designated enemy, a stadium schematic.
Right, the machinery.
Exactly. And then the world stops. The machinery halts. In that terrifying quiet, she retreats into what she called whims, dreams, and fears.
I have to say, I admire the absolute romanticism it takes to look at a carefully audited balance sheet and mistake it for a diary entry.
It is a diary entry.
She didn't throw the checklist away, though. She simply recognized that the stadium pop checklist was momentarily obsolete. In a world dealing with mass casualty and economic freefall, sparkling leotards are suddenly a massive brand liability.
So you think she just pivoted for the sake of the brand?
Absolutely. She swapped that checklist for a highly lucrative indie aesthetic blueprint. Let's not mistake a brilliant corporate repositioning for a rustic cabin retreat. Within 24 hours of that surprise drop, Universal and Republic were reporting 1.3 million global sales.
But that doesn't negate the art itself.
We're looking at 80.6 million Spotify streams in a single bay. That isn't a whimsical musing slipping quietly into the void. That is a masterclass in brand survival, where she built a completely new machine, dressed it in a vintage cardigan, and secured her third Album of the Year Grammy.
But you're completely ignoring the causal reality of how this music was actually made. I mean, the intent dictates the outcome.
Does it, though?
Yes. It was a remote recording process driven by sheer necessity and profound isolation. Aaron Dessner comes into the picture in late April 2020, right in the thick of the global lockdown. They aren't in a boardroom pitching demographics.
No, they're just sending files.
Right, sending files back and forth in the dark, building this deeply quiet soundscape out of upright pianos and acoustic guitars. And look at the timeline. Dessner himself noted that The One and Hoax were written at the very end of the process, acting as these emotional bookends.
Okay, but wait, let's look at the metadata before we, crown Aaron Dessner the rustic savior of her artistic soul.
The metadata reflects the isolation.
No, it dismantles the cabin in the woods myth completely. This supposedly quiet, organic album was engineered across a sprawling, high-end facilities. We're talking Kitty Committee in Beverly Hills, Long Pond in New York, Rough Customer, Electric Lady, Conway.
But that's just the logistics of modern recording. You're faulting her for using professional studios during a pandemic when people couldn't physically be in the same room.
I'm faulting the narrative, because when it came time to mix this supposedly lo-fi indie project, they didn't leave it raw. They didn't leave the tape hiss. They handed it to Serban Jania and John Haynes.
They wanted it to sound good.
Serban Jania is the absolute elite industry standard for mixing top 40 mainstream pop. He makes things sound expensive and perfect for radio, which contradicts the entire premise of a messy, organic surrender. And the visual language.
The foggy, woodsy aesthetic.
Exactly. That was a tightly directed, highly capitalized corporate execution. You had Rodrigo Prieto, an Academy Award-nominated cinematographer who shoots for Scorsese, acting as the DP for the Cardigan video. It is highly managed corporate cosplay of indie authenticity.
It isn't cosplay if the evolution of the artist is genuine. And the evolution here wasn't just sonic, it was entirely structural. For her entire career, she relied on the autobiographical. Tabloid fodder lyrics defined her 2010s output.
True, the celebrity drama was her bread and butter.
Right. But on Folklore, she steps away from the mirror and actually builds a mythological American town. Let's talk about the teenage love triangle she constructs across Cardigan, August, and Betty. Academics have pointed out her masterful use of disnarration here.
Disnarration? You mean, leaving things vague?
It's the deliberate act of leaving narrative gaps. It's presenting possibilities that aren't explicitly confirmed, forcing the audience to mentally step in and co-create the meaning. That is how art functions as modern folklore.
I find it incredibly naive that you don't see how that exact literary evolution is, well, the ultimate defensive PR strategy.
How is literary growth a PR strategy?
Look at the mechanics of why she had to pivot. The Guardian explicitly noted at the time that the album freed her from celebrity drama. For years, her brand was a massive lightning rod for tabloid scrutiny, which was exhausting and becoming a commercial liability.
So she writes fiction instead.
Exactly. She writes The Last Great American Dynasty, a historical biography, because using history as a firewall effectively insulates her own drama. She writes Mad Woman to address misogyny without naming a specific executive, completely firewalling her personal brand from risk.
So you're saying fiction is just a shield? Literature is just risk management?
In this context, yes, because let's look at your academic concept of disnarration. Your academics might call leaving deliberate gaps co-creating meaning, but in the tech industry, we call it algorithmic user engagement.
Oh, come on.
It's true. By refusing to say what happened to the character James, she creates a deliberate data void. And what happens with the data void? Fans immediately rush to TikTok and Twitter to fill it with their own theories.
They're engaging with the art.
They're doing the marketing for her. She mitigated all personal exposure while maintaining absolute market dominance. It isn't just literary growth. It is brilliant, weaponized risk management.
If it's purely risk management, then explain the sheer, unprotected vulnerability of a track like My Tears Ricochet. If this is all a calculated firewall, why does the emotional core bleed so heavily?
Because it's a well-written song.
It's a gothic elegy. And crucially, it is the only song on the standard edition where the metadata lists Taylor Swift as the sole writer. There is no co-writer to hide behind, no fictional character to project onto.
You're isolating one track to prove a rule that the rest of the album contradicts.
I'm not isolating one track. Look at Exile. The cross-pollination with Justin Vernon isn't just a feature bought for indie credibility. It's a genuine dialogue between two distinct emotional masses. They are fundamentally misunderstanding each other in real time.
But it is exactly a hedged portfolio, and the album's dual architecture proves it perfectly. You want to talk about the track list as a spiritual document? Let's talk about the corporate reality of the song credits.
The credits don't erase the art.
They explain the business model. She masterfully balanced two completely different production camps to hedge her bets. On one side, you have the Aaron Dessner camp providing the lo-fi credibility, bringing the acoustic guitars and the mellotron to manufacture nostalgia on demand.
And the other side?
She kept the Jack Antonoff camp securely in place to quietly maintain the pop algorithms and mainstream accessibility. Tracks like Mirrorball and August still possess that fundamental pop pulse. They just turn the brightness down on the mixing board.
It's still a cohesive album.
But look at the publishing splits. The songs with Dessner are tied up in Ingrid Stella Music and TASRM Publishing. The Antonoff tracks connect to Sony ATV. The music might sound like a solitary walk in the woods to you, but the metadata reads exactly like a Fortune 500 merger.
The sheer complexity of modern music publishing doesn't invalidate the emotional reality of the art itself. Of course, there are LLCs. She is a professional musician navigating a heavily litigious industry. That is a logistical necessity, not a moral failing.
But the performativity is hard-coded into those tracks.
Conceptually, Mirrorball is a devastating admission of the exact performativity you are currently accusing her of. She uses that hazy Hammond B3 organ to confess that she breaks herself into a million pieces just to reflect the expectations of her audience.
Because she knows exactly what she's doing. It's meta-awareness packaged as a product.
No, it's a confession, and this is me trying. You call it accessible pop, but it doesn't romanticize failure into some grand redemptive stadium anthem. It's an A major confession of diminished potential.
Scored perfectly to background study music.
It's about someone struggling with burnout and, unbearable expectations. The fact that it was legally registered through Sony doesn't make the pain in the lyric, "I just wanted you to know that this is me trying," any less real.
And yet, that very specific, highly curated pain was impeccably scheduled, packaged, and monetized to the tune of 846,000 units in its first week in the US alone. You are trying to separate the art from the commerce, as if the art is pure.
Sometimes it is.
In Taylor Swift's ecosystem, the art is the commerce. Look at a track like Illicit Affairs. It's beautifully rendered human ruin, yes, but it is perfectly engineered to evoke a specific demographic's melancholia.
You are fundamentally mistaking the inevitable byproduct of her sheer global scale for a lack of authenticity. Yes, it sold millions of copies, because millions of people were trapped in their homes, terrified and desperate for something that spoke to the collective trauma of 2020.
It was an impeccable read of the market.
It provided a vocabulary for a grief we didn't fully understand yet, and the ultimate proof that the art transcended the industrial machine is the penultimate track, Peace. If this was just about selling a pop album, Peace wouldn't exist.
It's an aesthetic choice.
It is a reckoning. There is no grand pop resolution in that song, just that relentless bass pulse and the devastating admission of unfixable damage. She is explicitly stating that because of the circus that surrounds her, she can never offer peace.
Again, beautifully rendered.
It is an unvarnished truth that leaves the listeners sitting in the harsh discomfort of reality. Folklore will be remembered historically because it perfectly captured the profound psychological exhaustion of a world that had completely stopped. She finally surrendered the spectacle.
It captured the cultural mood perfectly, yes. And doing exactly that was the ultimate industrial triumph of the decade. Do not mistake an incredibly accurate read of the market for a spiritual surrender.
The vulnerability was real.
That vulnerability was shrink-wrapped, marketed, and sold to the tune of 2 million pure global sales in 2020 alone. She recognized that the grandiose pop spectacle was momentarily offensive in a world dealing with economic collapse, so she pivoted.
She just wrote what she felt.
She synthesized the aesthetics of quiet desperation into a product that was deeply palatable for mass consumption. Folklore wasn't a surrender to art. It is the undeniable proof that even the concept of indie authenticity is just another aesthetic that the pop machine can perfectly synthesize, conquer, and relentlessly monetize.